All right. Welcome back in. I hope everyone had a nice weekend. Um, yeah, we'll jump right in. I don't have too many exciting things to say. I think we're pretty, we're sitting at that midpoint of the semester. Hopefully your other classes are going well. I know some of them are probably bogging you down with midterms. Hopefully that is not how you're feeling about this class. We do have a quiz this week, so make sure that you do take that quiz. Doing it is probably the easiest approach to doing that quiz. If I think that the structure of this class, I used to do a midterm and a big final. I ended up, a couple of years ago deciding to break those down into these section quizzes that you have so that they're just a little more accessible and hopefully a little less crazy than the whole midterm final kind of setup. We're really, we've gotten through a few already now of our major case studies, starting, hey, Jean-Luc, getting a good feel, I think, for some of these countries and some of the similarities and differences. We'll continue that today as we talk about China and on Wednesday as well. And I just wanted to remind you, in a couple of weeks, class is going to be a little bit different. The week of the 24th. I'm not sure exactly what that's going to be yet. That will either be a guest speaker hosting class, or it may be a pre-recorded lecture that you'll just be able to watch at your convenience during that week. That is the week that we'll be covering Germany. So we will find a solution for the week that we're covering Germany, but just to let you know, that's going to be a little bit weird, and I'll be communicating whatever that weirdness is out beforehand through our course shell. So keep an eye out for that. Otherwise, we're hitting that midpoint. We have coming up soon. Before I started talking, I probably should have looked up the dates because I never remember the dates that I assign for things to be due. But soonish, you'll have the first of your paper projects in this class. The three papers that you'll be writing, two that examine one country each, and then a final comparative paper, are very much so meant to build into one another. And I think if you go back and review the syllabus and check out the details of that, you'll see how that works and why that works the way that it does. These are not intended to be terrible, taxing, useless papers. Not that anyone has ever assigned a busy work paper in their life, but these are not intended to be that. This is really intended to take step by step, take you through creating a comparative paper by the end of the semester, so that final paper doesn't feel like a surprise and doesn't feel like something that you have to do all of it during finals week, because I know how truly painful that will be. Cool. I just saw in the chat, Reese had asked if we'll have discussion. I'm guessing meaning that week of the 24th. So we'll get messaging out as well about discussion for that week. Yeah, and so we'll catch all of that up. But okay, sweet. I looked it up. I have it set for Friday the 21st. So that is next Friday that first paper is due. So this is the perfect time to be talking about it. The paper asks for you to take a look at one of the countries that we don't cover in this class. So the countries that we cover in this class are listed under the second paper, but the countries that we don't cover include several chapters in the textbook that we will not have time to cover just because there are too many countries and not enough weeks in a semester. I already feel like we're not really giving them their due half the time, because these are each countries we could discuss for an entire semester. But the first one asks you to pick a country we will not be covering, and to examine the central tenet of one of these aspects that the textbook lays out. So it is easy, accessible to do that with one of the countries from the textbook. I believe those countries are France, Mexico, Brazil, Nigeria, and South Africa. If you are terribly interested in a country that is not one of those and is not one of the countries that we're covering otherwise in class, by all means, do that instead. Like I said, I think I don't like busy work. I don't like assigning busy work. I don't like reading busy work, because then it always results in crappy essays. So I would much rather, if you have an area that you are truly interested in, I would much rather you examine that country. I suggest these countries because they're a good starting point, and you have them laid out in the textbook in this format already, where it kind of delineates, the different sections that you can choose. So the different sections to choose from are political regime, political conflict and competition, society, political economy, and current issues. So you pick one of those. That's what you're going to be comparing over the course of the semester. You pick one of those areas, and then you examine one country that we're not otherwise talking about in class in regards to that area. So you have that laid out in the textbook as a starter for those countries I mentioned. You might not have that if you choose a country outside of the textbook, but that's just fine. Each of these areas is truly broad enough that it will not be difficult to research, if you wanted to choose Ireland. If you want to study Ireland's political conflict and competition, fantastic. That won't be difficult to examine and to write a very good paper on. So does that make sense as far as picking one topic area? I have all this written out. I'm just reinforcing it in words because I don't want it to get confusing. You don't have to cover all 5 topic areas, especially with the length of these papers. The first paper just needs to be, what did I say? 3 pages. Okay. So for the length of a paper, covering all 5 would not be not doable. You shouldn't, if you're writing that much on these, you're not going in depth enough. Just pick one of them, go in depth, do it in depth, and get a really good feel for this in terms of that one country. Now, the second country analysis paper, sorry, I'll pause. That's the first country analysis paper. It's due on the 21st, which is a Friday. If you don't like Friday due dates, email me. Like, if you want the weekend. I don't know. Some of you have not taken my classes before, so you don't know that I'm kind of flexible when it comes to due dates. I put them there because me, like, as a procrastinator, if I didn't have a deadline, I would just never do it. So like, I know there are other students like me that like, you need that set deadline. But I also know that some people, it's easier for you to turn it in on Friday, and then you start, the next week's work over the weekend. I know some people work during the week, and so like having a deadline on a Friday sounds like a pain in the ass to you. If that's the case, shoot me an email. Like, I don't mind changing it. I just want to converse about that beforehand so that I know when it is due for you. Okay, I'm pretty flexible on that. Just talk to me if you'd prefer to turn it in Sunday instead of Friday or something like that. But this first paper coming up, any questions about this first paper where you're analyzing one country in terms of one of these areas of study?
So it can be like any country, just to be clear, any country not listed or that we've discussed about before. And also, I don't want to get into like really specific technicalities, but what's your definition of a country? Because I know like there are 5 different ways to define a country.
Yep. good way to apply what we've learned in class to my assignments for class. Let's, if you want to do something else outside of those, chat with me just to make sure that it's doable. I think it's doable for pretty much anything that we would consider that we could talk about being a country. There are going to be some where it's a little bit harder to research. Like I've had students who really want to do North Korea before. It is a bit harder to do this kind of research on North Korea just because there's not a lot of information out there from North Korea. All of the sources are pretty much external sources analyzing information about North Korea. If you're talking about, if you're talking about Palestine, if you're talking about the Holy See, if you're talking about Taiwan, sure, I have no problem. I will not make a public statement on any of those because I don't want to become an enemy of China. But like, for the sake of this class, you can use one of those if you're dying to use one of those. Yeah, I think I'm doing the CYA approach on that. I'm pretty open. I want it to be, I always got annoyed doing papers that I didn't really care about. So if there's something that interests you, like I want it to fit into this. I think that'll make it more interesting for you to write these papers, as well as, just making it easier for you and something that you may carry past this class into something else. I've had students before tell me that it was helpful to write this comparative paper because they then went on to take other comparative classes and they'd already done that. They'd already written something that is, truly comparative in nature. So if you have something in mind specifically, talk to me about it. I'll probably give you the go ahead on doing it. I just want to make sure to have that conversation with you before you start in on the research work. So this is a little bit of self-select, easy mode, medium mode, if you want to put this in video game difficulties. The easier mode is doing France, Mexico, Brazil, Nigeria, or South Africa. Just because those are in your textbook, they already have sections on each of these subtopics. But that is, by all means, not a limit on you, because I know that you will each have countries that you may really want to examine. And putting them in a comparative context is a really great way to delve into researching on a specific country. Other questions on this first paper coming up? And I do want to briefly mention, so that you see the overall structure of the other two, why this looks the way it does. Okay. So you'll see, if you glance ahead, the second country analysis paper does the same thing. So you should pick a topic area. When I say that, the society, political economy, political conflict and competition, whichever one of those that you choose for this first paper, I would like you to use that for the second paper as well. The second paper asks you to do that about one of the countries we do cover in class. So far, US, UK, Russia, China. We will also be covering Germany, Japan, India, and Iran over the rest of the semester. So you're doing the same approach in the same research area for one of the countries that we have covered. Partial reason to do that is that by the time it's due, the 18th of November, we will have covered most of those countries in class, at least had some discussion about them. I don't think we'll have gotten to Iran yet, but otherwise that's right at the end of the week where we're covering India. So we will have gotten a chance to talk about that in class. You'll, have already done some, reading, at least I hope, if you're doing the reading. You'll have done some reading about the country that you're doing. And it gives you a chance to do that well. You've already practiced doing it with one country. You do it for one of the countries that we study in class to take and expand on what that section is in the book. So you have that, as then a point of comparison. So if you look forward then to the final comparative paper, it sounds big, because like it is, it should be at least 8 pages in length, which is pretty big for a 1000 level class. The reason for that, though, is that you've already written 6 of those pages in these first 2 assignments, right? I fully intend for that to be what it is, with minor revisions. As I read these, as Will and I read through these and grade them, we will give you suggestions for revisions on these first 2 papers. The expectation for that final comparative paper is that you take those revisions, you implement those revisions, and you put those together to be the first 2/3, that's not quite the right math, 3/4 of your final paper. On top of that, you then flesh out that paper with what is needed to make it truly comparative, to stack these side by side. So hypothetically, let's say for this first paper, let's say you do the political economy of Brazil. Okay, so the first 3 pages of this final paper are political economy of Brazil. For the second paper, let's say you did political economy of Russia, because that's a country that we've covered. You have 3 pages on the political economy of Brazil. You have 3 pages of the political economy of Russia. You flesh out those 2 with a comparison of the political economies in both of those countries. You have the background already written. You make it comparative. You say, this is how these things are similar. This is how these things are different. If you want to make it truly comparative, there's a little bit of why there, which comes from our class, and you have your final paper written and submitted. I have that set to being due by the 14th. The 14th is the day of finals week that our final is supposed to be, but we don't have a final exam, so that just seems to fit. If you want to get that done beforehand, after you've submitted your final paper and we've gotten your revisions back on your second paper, if you want to submit that last one earlier than the 14th and be done with it before finals week, that is absolutely fine with me. Again, I'm a procrastinator, so anytime I've ever been offered that in my life, I have turned it in on the last minute that it's due. I probably would have started writing that final paper like the 13th of December. So I understand if that's you, that's me, that's the way I approach these things. But I want to give you the option to have a little bit of flexibility on that. Yes, Lydia.
I have a few questions.
Okay.
Can I ask what format you want the paper to be?
Sure. I'm pretty open on citation formats. MLA is kind of very easy, standard way of formatting these. However, this class is not only for political science majors, so I don't restrict your usage. If you're comfortable with something else, if you're comfortable with APA, if you are comfortable in Chicago, which for a long time Chicago was the most common in political science, which is really weird because like not many other areas used it. But if you're comfortable with Chicago, use Chicago. If you're comfortable with MLA, use MLA. If you have specific questions like if you use MLA, does the front page count towards your page count? No, it does not. A title page in MLA doesn't count towards your page count, that kind of thing. We can talk through those specifically, just shoot me an email. But yeah, in general, pick whatever format you're most comfortable with or you want to practice because it's the format that your field uses. I know that that's a helpful practice for some people as they may be in different fields from political science.
Okay, and then my second question is on one of the options. One of the options is current issues.
Sure.
What would that kind of look like? Because I feel like it could involve like a lot of the other options as well.
It certainly can. There can be overlap if you look at current issues. The way that your textbook kind of separates it out, I think is the easiest way to look at that. So if you want some good examples of these, look to that section in your textbook, because they separate out current issues on each of the case studies that we read about. So it really can be any current issues that face the government of that country. So things that the government is dealing with. For some countries, that might be very internal. For some countries, that kind of extends out and includes international relations type questions. Just kind of depends on the country, and how you can tie that in to the government's reaction to it. And I guess that would be the easiest way for me to say, if you want to narrow down what you want to look at major current issues that the country is facing, the government of the country is facing, because then that allows you to tie it in most easily to what we're learning about in this class. All the things that we're discussing are really focused on governmental structures. And you'll see that governmental structures are one of the largest impacts on how countries deal with their current issues. Does that help a bit, Lydia?
Yep, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Okay. Other questions? Anything else on these 3 scaffolded papers?
When are your office hours to discuss if we want to do a different country?
So I hold office hours. I can hold office hours. I generally do them on Tuesdays, but that has been when you're all remote, like nobody actually shows up for the open office hours. So honestly, emailing me and setting up an appointment is probably the easiest thing to do. Otherwise, I think I have office hours listed as between 10 and 1 on Zoom. But really just shoot me an email. I'd rather just set a time to chat with you, because then it's also not, you having to try to chat when other people are on during that time. So yeah, just shoot me an email. If we can talk about it over email, we will. If we need to have a Zoom chat, I'm more than happy to. And that is fine too, if you have a draft of the paper that you want to look at with me. With the number of students in the class, I can't quite read every draft and give feedback on every draft of these papers, but I'm more than happy to talk through what you have and what you're finding, or if you're having difficulty finding research, that as well. So best way to do that is just email me and let's set up a time to sit down one-on-one on Zoom and figure that out. Yeah. All right. Yeah, that kind of gives us an overview, I think, of the rest of our semester, which is always good to do around this midpoint so that you know what is coming. I hope that again doesn't feel too overwhelming to anyone. Especially, like I said, I've tried to design this paper so that it doesn't seem like it's just one giant paper that you have to do at the end of the semester. It's something that you can build into, and then hopefully that will make it less stressful when you get there around finals week. But that means that sorry, I should check. Yeah. So I saw Reese's question, and thank you for repeating those questions, because I sometimes forget to look at the chat as often as I should. All right. So transitioning into talking a little bit about China today, and we'll talk about China on Wednesday as well. We have to understand a new term, I think, to understand the history of China, and that is the term empire. We usually understand empire in a very Western way. So what is, for anyone that wants to chime in, what do you understand an empire to be?
a country that significantly expands beyond its borders. Like the US wouldn't be an example because we never expanded beyond our borders a lot. Our only colonies were like Puerto Rico and the Philippines, very small relatively compared to like France or the UK, where they became larger than their home territory with their empires.
Okay. Not a bad approach to it. I think there could be some debate on your statement of the US expanding its territory. We did, but we did it before a lot of other countries were doing that whole, the whole let's go grab every piece of land we possibly could thing. So the Native Americans and the Mexican people would probably disagree with the statement that the US has not expanded. Not saying you meant, but
sorry. Didn't want to cut you off, but just to clarify, what I meant by that was like we didn't make them colonies, we incorporated them into the US. So it's a bit different.
Yeah. And that's where we just have to be very clear with those differentiations, right? Because the expansion aspect, especially as we're seeing it in modern day happen in the Ukraine, we have to be very specific with the terminology that we use. Because the US likes to use the term manifest destiny, right? We expanded the territory of the United States, expanded Americanism for a period of a couple hundred years, very aggressively. Looking back to something like the quote unquote Louisiana Purchase, even just calling it that feels a little bit wrong from the perspective that a purchase implies all of these other ideals that we've already established are not set around the world. The Louisiana Purchase is predicated on a fact of both systems entering into the Louisiana Purchase through equal or roughly the same understanding of capitalistic economy, which was not the case, which is why the Louisiana Purchase broadly took advantage of the First Nations people in the United States. Matthew?
Arguably, it goes even further beyond that into post-World War II time. I mean, instead of calling them colonies, we call them military installations in foreign countries. I mean, you can ask Germany and Japan how they feel about us being there all the time. And you can, debate whether or not that classifies as an imperial style colony, but it loosely fits the definition.
Sure. So we have these definitional issues, and those definitional issues are time restrictive. As Matthew brings up, our understanding of some of these terms is very different after World War II than it was before World War II. And before World War II, we were in a period of understanding these in a different way than we even understood them in history. So all of this terminology, we've mentioned imperialism, we've mentioned colonialism. Those are two different distinct ways of taking land from the people that live there. We talk about expansion, manifest destiny, reclamation. All of these terms have been used at various points to justify that aspect, that invasive aspect of taking over land. The United States, in one point of view, is fairly minimal in its overall approach to conquest, given that it has very few territories. The United Kingdom was much more aggressive in that and was forced to return lands or grant independence to 20-something countries after World War II. Each country kind of has its own history with these ideals as well. And the understanding of that empire, what an empire is, that Reese gave us, this a country that expands outside of its, maybe original territory to such an extent, becomes a very subjective term then. In each of the empires that we commonly know, that term may or may not fit super well. And that is due to the fact, that is down to the fact that we generally think of empires in this Western way. That definition of expansion and, original territory comes to us from the Greeks. It is a Hellenistic vision of how empires are established. And that was carried forward through the Roman Empire. And most Western education teaches the Roman Empire as that precursor to the modern nation. Right? The Roman Empire expanded out and became one of the largest empires in history by taking over, subjugating other nations that existed, peoples that existed before on their own. The Roman Empire didn't convert everyone to being Roman. It allowed for sub-nations to exist and continue to exist as they had. Some, like the Gauls, just had to pay tribute to the Roman Empire. Some, even rebelled against the Roman Empire, but we still think of the Roman Empire as kind of that model empire in history. There's a lot of other ways to view the creation of empires, though. And we have to look outward. We have to look into some of the different empires that have existed to understand why those definitions and why those differences have changed over our understanding of history. So just to give you a few examples of non-Western empires, because I'm sure most of you have seen maps of, the Roman Empire at some point in time, but to give you a few of the examples of these non-Western empires that have dominated significant parts of the earth at various times, we have to look at, oh, did I skip? Sorry, I just have a few examples here. I thought I had the Persian Empire. Anyway, the Mongol Empire is a great example of an extremely expansive non-Western empire that ruled for hundreds of years. The Timurid Empire is another example. The Ottoman Empire, which was actually at its height under Suleiman the Magnificent, ruled a larger amount of land than the Roman Empire did. And yet we don't necessarily consider these empires or learn about these empires as much in Western education. And we have to look at China. China has dynastic empires that rule for hundreds of years and make up the vast majority of China's history, with the exception of the Mongol Empire, which even in and of itself is debatable in the sentence that I'm about to say. With the exception of the Mongol Empire, China has never really successfully been completely taken over by another nation. And I say that that's difficult to say because at the time, Mongols were considered foreign to China, even though what we eventually see is the incorporation of Mongolia into this unified China ideal. And we have to look at the fact that there are times that China has not been imperial. If we, look at Rees's definition, growing out of an original state to take over vast amounts of land beyond theirs, we might tie back to something like the Shang Dynasty in China as, a very small non-imperial dynasty that ruled over China for roughly 500 years. And it is not the size of modern China. We also have, the Qing Dynasty, which again ruled for hundreds of years, took over significant portions of the Asia subcontinent that are even beyond what China sees today as its land. So all of these are to say that our understanding of empires and our understanding of these, dynastic rulerships in China don't quite fit what we usually see as empires in the West, where we see this very, linear formation of empires growing out of this ancient Hellenistic, this Greek, this Roman ideal of go out and conquer. If you are powerful, you should, historically, you should be able to grow that power beyond your native land. And that is, as Reese puts it, a very accurate way of looking at empires. The more you can grow, the more powerful you are. Why don't we see that in Eastern empires? What's the difference in thought that leads to a different approach to Eastern empires not defining themselves by how much land they could obtain?
Maybe
Thoughts,
because they're
guesses?
more people focused, and there are also more ethnic groups that you have to win over compared to like the UK. You only kind of have the Brits and the Celtics. There's not a lot of ethnic or and kind of anything else really to conquer at the homeland. So when you're unified at the homeland or in the homeland, you can expand outward. I think that's kind of true for most European nations, Germany as well.
Okay, Ben?
I think it's also a cultural thing, right? You have these Eastern empires, they had very strict disciplines. They had a very deliberate way they lived their lives. A lot of Western emperors had a big chip on their shoulder. A lot of things they did came from a point of pride. And so taking land, right, and conquering people, that brought them some sort of egotistical satisfaction. While a lot of Eastern empires, their goal was to create an efficient and structured form of society.
Okay, other thoughts to add to that? I'm not looking for a right or a wrong answer. I'm looking for your thoughts on why some of these typifications of empires need to be differentiated between the West and the East.
Maybe this is like a pure guess, but it was harder for Eastern empires to expand. Like they were more isolated for a lot, both culturally and geographically from the West. So like if you look at a map of Asia, it's a lot of islands and not a ton of land mass apart from China and India. That's just a guess.
And Russia, to be fair.
True. Yeah.
But as several leaders have learned throughout history, including Napoleon and Hitler, you should never try to invade Russia. Just don't. Never invade Russia in the winter, and never go against the Sicilian when death is on the line. No, there are reasons for that. The Emperor Fabian of the Roman Empire is actually the one who essentially crafted a military tactic that Russia would later employ and has employed successfully in multiple wars, known as the Fabian strategy, which is that you withdraw so far and burn the land behind you such that it cannot be used to reinforce the military that is pursuing you. And if you do that long enough, the military that's pursuing you will run out of resources because they can't capitalize on the ground that they have achieved. And this has worked successfully for Russia multiple times. Like I said, both against Napoleon and against Hitler. Neither of them were able to successfully invade Russia, because you just have to do that long enough that they run out of supplies and then winter hits. Like Napoleon tried to invade Russia starting in like October, which was real dumb. But Hitler learned from that. Hitler tried to start his invasion in April, and still Russia was able to hold out long enough, employ the Fabian strategy long enough, that Hitler still ran up against winter in Russia. So yeah, but okay, you sorry, that was an offshoot, but yes, you have a few different reasons for this. You have reasons that relate to population centers. The empires that we see in China, in Asia, tend to be a little bit further apart. They're not as shoved together as they are in Europe. Europe, I would say, has, levels of diversity that do make it very difficult to do this. Even Germany, as we consider it today, consists of several hundred former kingdoms that made up Germany. It's always really interesting or important to think of the fact that Germany, as we think of it today, didn't exist before the 1860s. So that's, just less time than the United States has been around. But what Germany arose out of, it has, centuries of these warring feudal kingdoms that would consider themselves diverse, even if we think of them all as the Germanic people today. And our history books have been written to talk about them as the Germans. That's kind of German washing a lot of history in Central Europe. And though Rees does raise a good point about the British Isles, I think if we went back to, the Celts more than 500 years, the Celts would probably have a really big problem with being called anything similar to the Britons. So, this again is something where we have this evolution of not only cultural and racial understandings, but we have changing empires that help to define that. And that is something that is very important to hold on to. So we have, in these Eastern realms, we have different concepts of what nations are. We have countries as we define them today, hundreds of years before countries exist. And we have nations that want to unify under single banners. The nation of China is not something that is Eastern defined. The nation of China as it exists today is something that was defined by Western ideology. So empires in China, in Asia, in the Indian subcontinent, in Indonesia, which the islands that Rees mentions, Indonesia is a country defined by Western thought, that basically said, okay, all of these islands can just be together. We'll just make them one country, and that's, you get to have whatever governmental structure you want there. It gives us a very different concept of how we grow within and without of our country. In the West, where we have this definition, where we have this subjugation aspect in our growth of our understanding of nations, it makes sense to grow outward, to show your strength by expanding and taking over other areas. If you wanted to be the successful kingdom in Germany, you would try to take over the other kingdoms that constituted Germany. That concept did not carry out the same way in a place like China. In a place like China, the Chinese churned inward for their development of their kingdoms, of their empires. What was the Chinese people meant reinforcing the dynasty that already existed. So for instance, in this image that we're looking at here, we have different states that all existed under the Qing dynasty. Those states, if they were to be part of this great empire, should be reinforced and strengthened instead of looking outward to bring in other states, to bring in, India, Bengal, Burma, just a few of the ones that even show up on this map. Instead of bringing those into the Chinese empire, why not strengthen what the empire is and advance it so that it was a stronger empire? Both that and reaching out and taking over other countries are ways of improving an empire. It's just that different parts of the world engaged in this empire building in different ways. So we see in the East more focus on reinforcing the empires that already existed, taking this concept in a different direction. That is something that we will continue to see the impacts of, and even comments about to this day from the leadership in China. Because of this historical development of the empires in the East, because it was centrally focused on making a stronger centralized empire instead of expanding out, which I will mention ended up being the downfall of most Western empires as well, because you can only expand so far, and then you run out of the resources or the people or the capacity to rule over the empire that you have built, so it ends up falling apart, right? That's what the Romans experienced. That's what the UK experienced in a slightly more peaceful way with the end of World War II, but still experienced the shattering of that empire. That's what Russia experienced at the end of the Soviet Union. You get too big and your empire eventually shatters. China has taken a different approach to their historical view of these empires. It's not a growth and shattering of the empire over time. It's a strengthening of the central empire that has existed and a reinforcement of that empire that has resulted in the China that we see today. That hubris, that belief in the ultimate power of the Chinese empire, the Chinese history, has led, in their view, to China as it is today, and has led to the rightful place of the end result of these centuries of bureaucratic expression that is the Chinese Communist Party. China will say that, their government is based on communistic foundations, but it's not Marxist communism. It is distinctly and uniquely Chinese communism, as can exist nowhere else, because China is the greatest empire that has existed and continues to exist on the planet, according to the CCP. So that's like literally the briefest possible overview of all of Chinese history in context of what the word empire means in China, and informs the structure that we will examine on Wednesday of why the Chinese government is structured the way that it is, and why that structure has allowed it to continue to be a successful communistic state, even as the other attempted communistic empires have fallen off, like Russia. Cool. Leave. Goodbye. Have a great day. I'll see you on Wednesday.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Stop screen share and